If you dare report what happened tonight, I'll hit you with a harassment complaint. The words came from Detective Chloe Reed, the department's newest rock star, whose hands, the same ones that had cuffed dozens of felons, were currently clutching the front of my white lab coat. I glanced at the half-dissected corpse on my stainless steel table, then pushed my glasses up the bridge of my nose, my expression flat. Harassing a corpse, detective? Didn't know you were into that. A deep blush flooded her cheeks, her beautiful almond-shaped eyes flashing with a mix of fury and embarrassment. She snatched a scalpel from my tray and threw it at my feet, where it clattered harmlessly. Do you really need me to spell out for you, Dr. Caldwell? She took a menacing step closer. I just don't want you getting too friendly with that new intern. I said nothing, just held her gaze for a beat before letting my eyes drift to the space behind her. The corpse that was supposed to be chilling in a morgue drawer was at that very moment, sitting up and watching us with great interest. Ahem. The cough shattered the sterile silence of the morgue. Chloe's body went rigid. Mechanically, inch by excruciating inch, she turned her head. On the autopsy table, the body, half covered by a sheet, slowly sat up, pulled the toe tag off his face, and broke into a crinkly, amused grin. Hey, kids, you mind not having a lover's quarrel in my funeral parlor? It's bad juju. Kenny Pops Malone, the department's most senior undercover detective, chuckled at us. Chloe's face went on a 1-second journey from crimson to sheet white, finally settling on a mottled purple of pure, unadulterated mortification. She looked from Pops to me, her lips trembling, utterly speechless. I'd set her up, just to watch this happen. I could see the thought forming behind her eyes. Pops, bless his heart, just had to pour gasoline on the fire. Attaboy, Jules. This fiancé of yours has more fire than her old man ever did. The word fiancé hit her like a taser. She flinched back, a sharp, violent jerk, like a cat whose tail had just been stepped on. Who's his fiancé? She shrieked, her voice cracking. Julian Caldwell, you are an asshole. She stomped her foot, her eyes instantly welling up. With that parting shot, she turned and fled, her escape so flustered she was practically marching out of sync. I watched her clumsy retreat, the tight line of my jaw finally relaxing, allowing a small smile to escape. Playing it cool, huh? You were practically drooling. Pops hopped off the table, dusting himself off, his words hitting their mark. I slipped back in my usual detached demeanor and poured him a cup of the break room's terrible Keurig coffee. Thanks, Pops. If you don't push her like that, I added, she'll never learn to just say what she means. Pops took a sip and grimaced. You young people in your games. When I was courting your aunt, all it took was a bouquet of daisies. I didn't answer. My mind was already replaying a highlight reel of Chloe's greatest hits, a lifetime of climbing fences and scaling walls to get into my house. At 5, it was to steal a piece of candy. At 15, it was because she'd bombed a test and was too scared to go home. At 20, it was after a blowout fight with her parents. It seemed she'd never learned how to use a front door. I complained about it for 2 decades, but the memories filled a space in my chest with a warmth that felt dangerously close to full. A soft knock echoed through the room. The new intern, Maya, stood in the doorway holding a folder, her cheeks flushed. Dr. Caldwell, here's the latest toxicology report. Her voice was quiet, her eyes filled with an undisguised, hero-worshipping awe. I nodded, deliberately softening my tone. Thanks, Maya. You've worked hard. Put on the desk. It's late. You should get home and rest. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of movement just outside the door frame. A familiar silhouette gone in an instant. Huh, my little green-eyed monster. She hadn't gone far at all, which meant the window to my study was in for another assault tonight. I slowly took off my lab coat, packed up my things, and drove home. I didn't go straight upstairs. Instead, I stopped at the 24-hour pharmacy for a bottle of muscle rub and a box of Band-Aids. Then, a swing through the convenience store for a mountain of her favorite chips and chocolate bars. Back in my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights, heading straight for the study. And there it was on the white pane of the windowsill, a fresh, small, muddy footprint. I shook my head, setting the first aid kit and the bag of snacks gently on the low credenza by the window. Then, I closed the door and went to take a shower. Everything was under control. The feeling was damn it all exquisite. As the hot water streamed over me, I wondered where she'd be hiding this time. The closet? She tried that once. I'd lured her out with a fresh apple. Behind the curtains? Also a bust. She couldn't hold back a sneeze. Under the desk, maybe? I dried my hair, pulled on a robe, and pushed open the study door. The room was dark, lit only by the silver wash of moonlight pouring in. I didn't flip the switch, navigating by memory toward the window. She was here. Of course she was. The window was ajar, the night breeze making the curtains dance. The snacks and first aid kit I'd left sat untouched on the credenza. But next to them, there was a new addition. A small, curled-up figure. Chloe was sitting on the wide windowsill, her arms wrapped around her knees, her head buried in her arms. She looked like a kitten abandoned by the entire world. My footsteps made her shoulders twitch, but she didn't look up. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Welcome, Detective Reed." My voice was sharp in the quiet room. "Are you here to steal state secrets? Or just to steal me?" Her head snapped up. In the dark, her eyes were shockingly bright, glistening with unshed tears. "I'm here to see if you've got a new girl stashed away," she retorted, trying to sound tough. She jumped down from the sill, a clean, athletic movement, but her ankle buckled on landing and a muffled cry of pain escaped her lips. I was across the room in a second, catching her before she could fall. "And you go to catch bad guys with moves like that?" I mocked, even as I scooped her up into my arms and carried her toward the sofa. Her whole body went stiff, her hands hovering awkwardly in the air. "Put me down. Jules, you bastard, put me down." She struggled, but her fists beat against my chest with all the force of a falling leaf. I ignored her, placing her gently on the couch before kneeling to examine her slightly swollen ankle. "Don't move." My tone left no room for argument. I uncapped the muscle rub, warmed it between my palms, and pressed my hands to her ankle. She sucked in a sharp breath at the warm contact, and her struggles ceased. The darkness in the room thickened, becoming something intimate. She wouldn't look at me. Her gaze darted around the room, finally landing on a file on my desk, the intern application. Maya's photo was clipped to the top. "You knew," she mumbled, her voice thick with hurt. "You knew why I became a cop." My hand stilled. A memory, locked away for years, came rushing back. 8 years ago, she was a freshman in college, drunk and heartbroken, climbing through this very window in the middle of the night. There was no moon. She threw herself into my arms, sobbing, wiping tears and snot all over my clean white shirt. "Jules, I love you. I've loved you for years. Why won't you even look at me? Why do you only have eyes for your corpses?" The smell of cheap beer and her own sweet, girlish scent was enough to incinerate my self-control. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms just to stay grounded. I had to push her away. I looked at her tear-streaked face, my own heart constricting until I could barely breathe. But the words that came out of my mouth were as cold and sharp as a scalpel. "Chloe, you're drunk. This is just a whim. The person I spend my life with has to be my partner. Someone who understands my work, who can stand shoulder to shoulder with me. A peer, not a little girl who cries all the time and needs me to protect her." Her sobs stopped instantly. She stared at me, her expression one of shattered disbelief. I forced myself to meet her wounded gaze, delivering the final, cruel blow. "When you can earn that gold shield, detective captain, on your own merit, then you can come back and say that to me again." I pushed her away with my own 2 hands, sending her down a path I knew would be lined with thorns. After she left that night, I sat in my study until dawn. The cuts in my palms were nothing compared to the agony in my chest. "How much longer?" I asked softly, my voice breaking the silence. My touch on her ankle gentled without me realizing it. Chloe's eyes were completely red now, tears shimmering, but she stubbornly refused to let them fall. She lifted her chin and glared at me, as if taking an oath. "Not long. You just wait, Julian Caldwell. I'm going to slap the cuffs on you myself. The charge." Her voice dropped to a whisper, almost as if she were speaking only to herself. "Disturbing the peace. My peace." I heard every word. It felt like a physical blow, right over my heart. I lowered my head, focusing on kneading her ankle, hiding the storm of emotion in my eyes. The fool. She had no idea. I wasn't just waiting for that day. I'd been waiting for 20 years. The peace didn't last. A week later, the city was rocked by a vicious serial killer. 3 victims, all young women, all showing signs of torture. The department formed a task force. Chloe was lead detective, and as chief medical examiner, I was her primary consultant. The air in the conference room was heavy. The projector displayed photos of 3 mutilated bodies. Chloe stood at the front, her voice calm and methodical as she broke down the case. The victims have different professions, no overlapping social circles. The only commonalities are that they all had long, straight, dark hair and a slender build. The killer has excellent anti-surveillance skills. No usable prints or DNA were left at any of the scenes. I leaned back in my chair, watching her, this formidable woman in command, and felt a wave of something I couldn't name. She really had grown up. She was no longer the little girl who cried behind my back. Dr. Caldwell, your thoughts? Chloe's question pulled me back to the present. I stood and walked to the front, pointing to a few overlooked details on the projected images. The fatal wounds on all 3 victims are on the neck, but there's a subtle difference in the wound angle between the first 2 victims and the third. My theory is there's more than one killer, or the killer is switching weapons. Furthermore, under the third victim's fingernails, I found trace amounts of a specific synthetic fiber, not from her own clothing. I began the profile. Our unsub has a powerful desire for control. He enjoys the process of his prey struggling. His next target will likely be a woman who appears fragile on the outside, but has a core of stubborn defiance. The moment the words left my mouth, Maya, the intern, lit up. She looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated worship. Dr. Caldwell, before she could finish, Chloe cut her off, her voice like ice. This is a task force meeting. Interns do not have the floor. The color drained from Maya's face, and she sank back in her seat, humiliated. After the meeting, Chloe cornered me in the hallway. Why were you so nice to her just now? There was again that jealousy. I was merely stating the facts of the profile. I said coolly. The facts? Your profile was one step short of reading out her social security number. Her chest heaved with indignation. I knew she'd misunderstood, but watching her get jealous over me was entertaining. I didn't bother explaining, simply stepping around her to leave. Jules, she yelled after me. Don't you walk away from me. I kept walking. 2 days later, the case hit a wall. No 4th victim had appeared, and a cloud of anxiety settled over the entire precinct. I was in my lab analyzing the trace fiber when Maya knocked and came in. Dr. Caldwell, is there anything I can do to help? She seemed nervous, her palms slick with sweat. I didn't look up from the microscope, just organized the case files. Okay, she said, but she lingered, shifting her weight from foot to foot. Dr. Caldwell, I think I might fit the victim profile you described. She finally found her courage. I want to be the bait. I stopped what I was doing and looked up at her. Don't be ridiculous. This is not your concern. Get out. My tone was glacial. Maya flinched as if struck, her eyes filling with tears before she turned and ran from the room. I paid it no mind and went back to my work. It wasn't until a half hour later that Chloe kicked open the door to my lab. Jules, Maya's gone. Her face was ashen, her voice trembling. My stomach dropped. The security footage? Her last known location was the abandoned shipyard on the west side. Her phone's off. I tore off my lab coat, grabbing my car keys and sprinting for the door. Chloe was already ahead of me, halfway to the parking garage. The look she gave me was terrifyingly complex. Anger, disappointment, and a sliver of something else I couldn't quite decipher. Fear. I knew, in that moment, she wasn't just worried about Maya. She was afraid. Afraid that something would happen to me because of Maya. The realization was a sharp, painful ache in my chest. The squad car screamed toward the west side. In the surveillance room, Chloe had been glued to the monitors. The second she saw Maya go dark, she was out the door before I was, ordering a full-scale deployment. I felt a knot of dread, not for the intern, but for Chloe, for what she might do in her recklessness. The abandoned factory reeked of rust and decay. We found a locked warehouse and heard a faint cry from within. I'm going in. You guys provide backup. Ignoring my protests, Chloe kicked the rusted steel door clean off its hinges. The second the door flew open, a dark figure lunged out, a knife glinting in his hand. Chloe, my vision tunneled. On pure instinct, I threw myself forward, shoving her behind me. At the same time, I pulled a spare scalpel from my belt holster and flung it without a second thought. The blade sliced across the attacker's wrist. He screamed in pain, and the knife clattered to the concrete floor. Chloe reacted instantly, executing a perfect takedown that slammed him to the ground, where she held him in a chokehold. A moment later, tactical units swarmed the building. Inside the warehouse, Maya was tied to a chair, shaking uncontrollably. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I was about to check Chloe for injuries when a smooth, slightly detached voice cut through the chaos. "Chloe, that was reckless." I looked up to see a man in a tailored trench coat approaching. He walked directly to Chloe, his tone a mixture of concern and reprimand. Agent Mark Donovan, the hotshot from the State Bureau of Investigation, sent down to oversee the task force. He was also the guy who, back at the academy, had made it his personal mission to win Chloe's affection. Donovan's gaze swept over me, lingering for a moment on how close Chloe and I were standing. His eyes darkened. He shrugged off his coat, intending to drape it over her shoulders. But Chloe took a half step back, avoiding the gesture. "Agent Donovan, thanks for your concern. I'm fine." Her tone was polite but distant. Donovan's hand froze in midair. He shot me a look, a clear note of hostility in his voice. "Dr. Caldwell, crime scene analysis is your expertise. Perhaps you should leave the apprehending to us professionals." The words were couched in politeness, but the accusation was clear. I had overstepped. Chloe's brow furrowed instantly. Without thinking, she moved to stand in front of me, like a mama bear protecting her cub. "Mark, what the hell are you talking about? If it wasn't for Jules, I'd be the one on the ground bleeding right now. He is a consultant on this task force, and his judgment just saved all of our lives." She defended me, fiercely and without hesitation, in front of everyone. The color drained from Donovan's face. The atmosphere at the debriefing was toxic. Donovan, as the state expert, sat at the head of the table, holding court. He attributed the success of the operation to state intelligence and his own brilliant leadership. My scalpel-throwing intervention was dismissed as an unorthodox field expediency, not to be encouraged. Chloe's expression grew colder by the second. I, on the other hand, couldn't have cared less. I was leaned back in my chair, already absorbed in the final autopsy reports. The truth mattered more than the credit. When the meeting finally ended, a collective sigh of relief filled the room. "Chloe, a word," Donovan said, stopping her as she was about to leave. I paused at the door, waiting. On the rooftop, the wind was strong, whipping strands of hair across Chloe's face. Donovan stood before her, adopting the posture of a concerned mentor. "Chloe, I know you and Dr. Caldwell grew up together. I know you're close. But this is a job, not a playground. His presence is starting to compromise your professional judgment." Chloe let out a cold laugh. "My judgment doesn't require your input." "Is that so?" Donovan pressed, stepping closer. "Then tell me, that stunt you pulled tonight, kicking down that door, how much of that was for the intern, and how much of it was for him?" He meant me. "You're letting your personal feelings cloud a case. That's a fatal mistake for a detective." She was speechless, her face flushed with anger. I chose that moment to walk over, a new report in my hand. My footsteps were quiet, but they both heard me. "Agent Donovan, if you have time to lecture my fiancée, perhaps you should first take a look at your own deeply flawed investigation." My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the wind with terrifying clarity. Donovan's face paled. "What do you mean, Caldwell?" I ignored him, handing the report directly to Chloe. "Look at this." I pointed to the trace evidence analysis. "There's more than one killer. The different wound angles I mentioned, it wasn't a different weapon. It was two different perpetrators. One is left-handed, the other is right-handed. You overlooked the fibers under the third victim's fingernails. They aren't from clothing. They're industrial-grade synthetic fibers used in manufacturing wigs. We have two killers. One works at a wig factory, the other is his partner. They weren't killing at random. They were engaged in a kind of role-playing murder game. And the intern, Maya, was never their target. She was just a distraction, designed to pull our resources away while they went after their real fourth victim." With every word I spoke, the blood drained further from Donovan's face. Chloe's eyes, however, lit up with a brilliant fire, the look of absolute trust and admiration. I took the report back from her and tossed it against Donovan's chest. Based on the specific sourcing of that fiber, we've already identified both killers and their location. While you were holding this ridiculous victory press conference, your own task force was bringing them in. Donovan stumbled back a step, his face a mask of disbelief. His professional pride, his authority, I had just demolished it with a single piece of paper. I walked to Chloe's side, took off my suit jacket, and draped it over her trembling shoulders. Then, right in front of Donovan, I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her into my side in a gesture that was both natural and possessive. I looked Donovan straight in his humiliated, resentful eyes. My voice was even, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. "My girl," I said, "whether she's being reckless or brilliant is none of your damn business." In my arms, Chloe's body, at first stiff, slowly relaxed. She buried her face in my chest, a triumphant smile spreading across her lips. Donovan stared at us, his jaw working, but no words came out. He turned, his entire being radiating defeat, and stalked away. The rooftop was silent, except for the wind. I looked down at the top of her messy head and let out a soft laugh. "So, can we make it official now, Detective Captain?" She pulled back, her eyes sparkling, full of laughter and starlight. She didn't answer with words. She just stood on her toes, and with all her strength, kissed me. The kiss tasted of the cold night air and her own unique, fiercely sweet flavor. The serial killer case was closed, a major victory for the department, and Chloe got most of the credit. A week later, at the commendation ceremony, I sat in the audience and watched her on stage. She wore her crisp dress uniform, the new, gleaming captain's bars pinned to her shoulders. She was radiant under the spotlights, a peak she had climbed, step by painful step, for me. Her speech was clear and confident, but her eyes scanned the crowd until they found mine, and there they stayed. The raw emotion in her gaze was a tangible thing. My heart burned in my chest. Afterward, she was swarmed by colleagues offering congratulations. I didn't join the crowd. I simply turned and left, sending her a single text message. "Morrison Planetarium, 8 p.m. Your reward." At 7:50 p.m., her Jeep Wrangler roared up to the curb. She'd changed out of her uniform and into a white dress, something I rarely saw her wear. She looked nervous, excited. When she pushed open the heavy doors, she stopped, stunned. The entire planetarium was empty. It was just her. "Jules?" she called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. No answer. Just as a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, the lights went out. The massive domed ceiling above her flickered to life. A river of stars swirled into existence, the vastness of the cosmos spreading out before her. She let out a small gasp. I stepped out of the darkness behind her, a laser pointer in my hand. I traced 2 constellations on the dome. "That one's Scorpius." "You." My voice was a low murmur next to her ear. "And that one is Virgo." "Me." From the day we were born, our orbits were destined to cross, to get tangled up. I moved closer, wrapping my arms around her from behind. She tensed for a second, then relaxed, leaning her full weight against me. I lowered my head, my breath warm against her ear. "Congratulations, Captain Reed. Now, you're my partner, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. And also, my one and only." The words were barely out of my mouth before she spun around. Before I could react, she kissed me, an eager, almost desperate kiss that held none of the hesitation of the one on the rooftop. It was pure, distilled longing, years of it, finally uncorked. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. She rested her head on my chest, looking up at the galaxy we were floating in, her eyes wet. "Jules, I did it." "Yeah," I said, kissing the top of her head. "You did. You always do." Later, I drove her home. We sat in the car outside her parents' house, the engine off. She'd unbuckled her seatbelt, but made no move to leave. "What's wrong?" I asked. She looked at me, then away. "So, should I still use the window?" I laughed, reaching over to ruffle her hair. "You idiot." I got out, walked around to her side, and opened her door. Then I took her hand. "From now on," I said, "we use the front door." I led her up the walkway and rang the bell. Her mom opened the door. She saw our joined hands, blinked once, and then broke into a knowing, relieved smile. "Julian, it's about time. Get in here, both of you." Her dad appeared from the living room, adjusted his glasses, and gave me a long, appraising look that ended in a satisfied nod. Chloe, caught in the crossfire of parental approval, blushed for the first time I could remember, turning a shade of red so deep she looked like she might combust. She stared at her feet, refusing to look at me. I walked her to her bedroom door. "Get some rest, girlfriend," I murmured and leaned in to press a soft kiss to her forehead. Her head shot up, her eyes looking like they held entire constellations of their own. "Good night, boyfriend," she whispered, then darted into her room and shut the door. I leaned against the wood, listening to her muffled, happy laughter from the other side, and couldn't stop myself from smiling. The long game, the years I'd spent carefully calculating every move, had finally paid off. Our relationship was finally out in the open, with everyone's blessing. The good times didn't last long. Chloe received an order from the state. She'd been selected for a 6-month, intensive training program at a remote facility, the FBI Academy at Quantico. The day the letter arrived, she deflated like a balloon. That night, she was back at my window, curled up in my arms, refusing to let go. 6 months. That's like 1,000 days, she mumbled into my shirt. "I'm going to miss you." I stroked her hair, a hollow feeling opening up in my own gut. But I kept my voice even. "This is a necessary step for your career. Go, train hard. Don't embarrass me." She punched my chest weakly. "You're a robot, Jules. A heartless, unfeeling robot." I just smiled. I saw her off at the train station. She kept looking back, her eyes red. I just stood on a platform and waved until she was gone. After she left, it was like a piece of my life had been surgically removed. The lab was too quiet, the air too thin. The only thing I looked forward to was our nightly video call. The training was brutal. She got thinner, tanner, but her eyes grew brighter, more focused. Sometimes she'd be so tired she could barely keep her eyes open, complaining about the food. "Boiled kale. Boiled squash. I'm going to turn into a vegetable," she'd groan. "I want you to make me your brisket." Watching her pouting on the tiny screen made my heart ache. A month later, on a Friday night, she was a wreck. She just finished a high-intensity field exercise, her face streaked with sweat and grime, her voice hoarse. "Jules, I'm so tired. I miss you." I hung up and, without a second of hesitation, booked the first flight to Virginia. Saturday morning, I showed up at the front gate of the Quantico base, carrying a massive insulated cooler. The Marine Guard stopped me. I flashed my special consultant badge from the state. "I'm here on official business with Captain Reed." The guard made a skeptical call, and a moment later, a flustered-looking instructor came jogging out to personally escort me inside. I found out the finish line for their wilderness survival exercise and drove out to wait for her. At 4 p.m., Chloe and her squad staggered across the finish line, covered head to toe in mud. She collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. Then she looked up and saw me, leaning against an SUV in a clean white shirt, completely out of place in the middle of the woods. She froze, rubbing her eyes, certain she was hallucinating. I gave her a small smile and held up the cooler. "Your Uber Eats is here, Captain." The next second, she shot up from the ground as if launched from a catapult and sprinted toward me. Her squad mates just stared. "Is the captain okay?" "Who's the pretty boy?" "Her old man." Chloe crashed in my arms, clinging to me so tightly I thought she was trying to merge our bodies into one. "Jules, what are you doing here? You're insane." She was laughing and crying at the same time, her words a jumbled mess. I patted her back and opened the cooler. The rich, smoky aroma of brisket filled the air. It had been slow cooking all night, along with a few of her favorite sides. I'd even gotten creative, carving a cherry tomato into the shape of a heart, arranging broccoli florets like lungs, and using shredded carrots for arteries. I picked up the tomato heart with a pair of tongs and held it to her lips. "Replenish your vitals, Captain." She looked at it, and a real, honest-to-God laugh burst out of her, though it just made the tears flow faster. She opened her mouth and ate it in one bite. Then, in front of her entire team, she grabbed my face with both hands and planted a hard, hungry kiss on my mouth. It tasted of dirt and sweat and salt. It was the sweetest thing I had ever tasted. Watching her devour the food I'd made gave me a deeper sense of satisfaction than cracking the most complex case. When Chloe returned from Quantico, she was a different person. Sharper, faster, with an edge of steel that made her the undisputed top cop in the city. Our relationship settled into a comfortable rhythm. The only thing missing was a ring. Just as I was trying to figure out the logistics of a proposal, disaster struck. I was reinvestigating a 10-year-old cold case, a corporate accountant whose death had been ruled an accidental fall. A new examination of the skeletal remains showed microfractures inconsistent with a fall. They were consistent with repeated blows from a blunt instrument. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. My digging had rattled someone's cage. I was working late one night, walking through the empty parking garage to my car. As I unlocked the door, a drunk staggered out from behind a concrete pillar, swinging a lead pipe straight at my head. I moved fast, dodging the fatal blow. But in protecting the evidence bag in my hand, I took the full force of the impact on my right arm. Pain, white-hot and blinding, shot through me. I let out a grunt and, with my left hand, delivered a precise chop to the man's carotid sinus. He crumpled to the ground. I leaned against my car, staring at my right arm, now bent at an unnatural angle. I calmly called 911, then the paramedics. Lying in a hospital bed, my arm in a heavy cast, I gave my statement to my colleagues, making them promise not to tell Chloe. She just closed a huge case. She needed the rest. I thought I could keep it from her. I underestimated her network. At dawn the next morning, my hospital room door flew open. Chloe stood there in a trench coat, her hair a mess, dark circles under her eyes. She had clearly driven through the night. She rushed to my bedside. The sight of my arm in the sling made her eyes flood with tears. But she wiped them away in a single, vicious movement, her expression hardening into something cold and lethal. Who did it? Her voice could have frozen water. Before I could answer, she turned and strode out of the room. Half an hour later, the police commissioner called me, his voice weary. Jules, your better half, just stormed my office and swore on her badge she was taking over your assault case. Her exact words were, "Whoever touched my man is going to die in prison." I held the phone, a warmth spreading through my chest. That fool. From that day on, Chloe subjected me to 24/7 surveillance. She merged my case with hers, spending her days hunting down leads and her nights sleeping on the pull-out chair in my room. She took over every aspect of my care, feeding me, washing my face, helping me change, all with the domineering attitude of a drill sergeant. Don't move your hand. Stop fidgeting. Open your mouth. When a nurse came to change my dressing, Chloe would stand over them like a hawk, ready to strike if they caused me the slightest discomfort. I was in heaven. I even started faking pain just to watch her fuss over me, her face a storm of anxiety and love. Then I'd hide my smile when she turned away. A week later, they had him, the killer from the cold case, now the VP of the same company. He'd panicked when he heard I'd reopened the file and hired a thug to take me out. The day they made the arrest, Chloe came back to the hospital, silent. She meticulously checked my cast, tucked me in, and then she sat on the edge of the bed, took my good arm, buried her face in my shoulder, and began to sob. She cried like a child, letting out all the fear, anger, and stress she'd been bottling up for a week. I held her, stroking her back, letting her tears soak through my hospital gown. "It's okay," I whispered. "It's over now. I'm here." I held her tight, and in that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to make this woman, the one who cried for me, fought for me, and lived for me, mine, permanently. The day I was discharged was Chloe's 27th birthday. I checked out early without telling her, then went to her favorite restaurant and booked their best table. As a gift, I'd managed to track down a rare, out-of-print Victorian anatomical atlas she'd been wanting for years. At 7 p.m., I stood outside the restaurant, the beautifully wrapped gift in my hand. Through the window, I could see the private dining room. There were a dozen people inside. Chloe was at the center of the table, and next to her sat Mark Donovan. A massive birthday cake, candles already lit, sat in front of her. Donovan was holding up a glass of champagne, smiling at her. "Happy birthday, Chloe. I also hope you'll seriously consider my offer. With your talent, a transfer to the State Bureau is the logical next step. The sky's the limit." A few of her old colleagues chimed in. "Yeah, Captain, Donovan's right. You two would be the perfect power couple." My feet stopped cold. The gift in my hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy. For the first time, I felt a tremor of something I could only describe as insecurity. Just then, Chloe glanced up, her eyes sweeping across the room. The moment she saw me standing there, her entire face lit up. It was the look of someone lost in the desert, spotting an oasis. Without a moment's hesitation, she cut Donovan off mid-sentence. "Thank you for the offer, Agent Donovan." She stood up. As everyone watched in stunned silence, she walked directly toward me. The click of her heels on the hardwood floor was a drumbeat counting down to something momentous. She didn't offer a single word of explanation. She just walked right up to me, stood on her toes, cupped my face in her hands, and gave me a deep, lingering kiss. In front of everyone, the room fell silent. Donovan's hand, holding the champagne flute, was frozen in mid-air. When the kiss ended, Chloe turned, linked her arm through mine, and faced the room like a proud peacock who had just won the war. Her smile was dazzling. "Everyone, I'd like to make a formal introduction. This is my fiancé, Julian Caldwell." She held up my hand, showing off the identical, simple bands we wore on our ring fingers. I'd given hers to her after she got back from Quantico. She'd worn it on a chain around her neck until tonight. She looked at Donovan's ashen face, her voice perfectly clear. "So, Agent Donovan, I'm afraid I can't accept your offer. I'm never leaving his side." A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over me. She knew everything. All this time, she had been protecting me, too. I bent my head and kissed her again, my voice thick with laughter. "Happy birthday, Captain, my future Mrs. Caldwell." On the 20th anniversary of the day we met, I drove her to the outskirts of the city, to the raised grounds of the old housing project where we grew up. All that remained was a field of weeds and a few lonely, ancient trees. We walked the overgrown paths, reminiscing. "Remember that basketball court? Where you pushed me down because I wouldn't let you have my Game Boy. Liar, you tripped over your own feet and went crying to my mom. And under that tree, where you pissed off the neighbor's dog and hid behind me. Jules, shut up. Not another word." She chased me through the ruins, laughing, and for a moment, we were kids again. I led her to the oldest, most crooked tree on the property, a gnarled old locust that had been spared the axe because it was too bent to be useful for anything. "Remember this?" I asked. She looked at the tree, her expression softening. "How could I forget? This is how I made my first break into your house." Climbed right up. She tilted her chin proudly. Stuck the landing, too. I shot her a look. You face-planted, scraped your chin, and cried for a solid 10 minutes. She flushed and punched my arm. Did not. I laughed and caught her hand, pulling a small wooden box from my pocket. She watched, curious. I opened it. Inside, there was no diamond, no platinum. Just a simple, rustic ring carved from locust wood. The band was plain, but etched into its surface with microscopic precision was the pattern of bone trabeculae. It was a perfect, scaled-down replica of my own phalanx bone. I didn't get down on one knee. I just took the wooden ring and slipped it onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. "This is the prototype," I said, meeting Chloe's eyes. "I carved it with my favorite number 22 scalpel. Took me a week. I'm designing the real one. It will be forged from the strongest metal on Earth and set with a diamond cut just for you." I paused, my voice dropping, becoming heavy with sincerity. "And when it's ready, Chloe, you'll have to start calling me your husband." Her eyes instantly filled with tears. The setting sun filtered through the sparse leaves, bathing her in a soft, golden light. She didn't speak. She just nodded, a fierce, trembling movement. "I've waited 20 years, she choked out. "I can wait a little longer." My heart melted. I pulled her into my arms, kissing the tears from the corners of her eyes. "It won't be long, I promised. I'm not that patient." We held each other as the sun went down, surrounded by the ruins of our past, with the brilliant light of our future stretching out before us. From childhood friends to partners in crime, and finally, to this, the long, sweet game, where she had walked willingly into every trap I'd ever set, was finally nearing its conclusion. A month later, we cracked a 15-year-old cold case together. The whole department celebrated. At the party, Chloe was surrounded, people toasting her success. Her tolerance was low, and after a few glasses, her cheeks were flushed. I moved to her side, smoothly intercepting drink after drink meant for her. Halfway through the night, I slipped away and sent her a text. Morgue, drawer A3, new evidence. I saw her read the message. Her expression shifted instantly. She said a few quick words to her colleagues and hurried out. I made my excuses to the commissioner and followed. The morgue was empty, silent except for the hum of the ventilation. A single surgical lamp cast a cold, sterile light over one of the steel tables. I waited in the shadows for my leading lady. Soon, the click of heels echoed down the hall. Chloe pushed open the door, her face still flushed from the wine, but her eyes were clear and focused. What did you find? She asked, pulling on a pair of latex gloves out of habit. I stepped out of the shadows, holding a metal tray covered with a sterile cloth. She saw me and froze. Jules? What are you doing here? What's the evidence? I didn't answer. I placed the tray on the autopsy table and lifted the cloth. There was no gruesome specimen. There was only a diamond ring, impossibly brilliant, scattering the light of the surgical lamp into 1,000 tiny rainbows. The band was a unique, intricate design of interlocking bones, cradling a flawless center stone. I had designed it myself, using a 3D model generated from her own X-rays. Chloe stared at it, then at me, the pieces slowly clicking into place. I straightened my suit jacket, and then, as she watched in stunned silence, I lowered myself to one knee. I looked up at my beautiful, formidable detective. Captain Chloe Reed, I began, my voice trembling slightly. I have processed 1,342 crime scenes. I have pieced together countless broken lives. But the most significant, most perfect discovery I have ever made is you. I have studied over 2,000 different ways a person can die. I have seen the absolute worst of humanity. But it was only when I met you that I understood what it meant to be alive, what it meant to love. My entire life, I have spoken for the dead. For the rest of my life, I only want to say 3 words, and only to you, I love you. I picked up the ring. Chloe, will you marry me? The silence in the morgue was absolute. I could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs. 1 second, 2, 3, and then she moved. Tears, fat and silent, streamed down her cheeks. She didn't say yes, didn't say no. She just held out her left hand and whispered the 2 words I had waited a lifetime to hear. I do, Dr. Caldwell. My hand shaking, I slid the ring onto her finger. There, on the cold steel table that had witnessed so much death, I began my new life. Our wedding was big and loud and perfect. We held it on the huge rooftop terrace of my apartment, with the entire glittering cityscape as our backdrop. The guests were all cops and coroners, a rowdy, wonderful bunch. Chloe wore a dress I'd helped design, and she looked like a goddess of righteous fury. Standing next to her, I felt like I owned the world. The commissioner himself was officiating. He was halfway through the ceremony when he got to the classic line, smiling broadly. If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The crowd chuckled, as if anyone would dare. But then, a clear voice cut through the laughter. I object. A hush fell over the terrace. Every head, including mine, turned. Mark Donovan, in his Immaculate State Bureau uniform, was on his feet. He wasn't smiling. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Chloe's face went rigid. Her hand tightened on mine, her knuckles white. I could feel her gearing up to throw down, heels and all. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Let's see what he had to play. Donovan walked calmly to the front, took the microphone from the commissioner, and faced the crowd. Everyone held their breath, anticipating a dramatic, last-minute plea. He cleared his throat, his eyes moving from Chloe to me. And then he smiled. It was a genuine smile, free of bitterness or regret. I object, he said, drawing out the words, to the fact that it took these two this long to get married. Inexcusable lack of efficiency. The terrace was silent for a beat, and then erupted in a roar of laughter and applause. Even Chloe was stunned into a laugh, shaking her head as she shot him a half-angry, half-amused glare. Donovan's expression turned serious and sincere. Just breaking the tension, he said. Jules, he looked at me. For a long time, I thought I was the better man for her. I could offer her a better career, more protection. But I get it now. You understand her in a way I never could. And you deserve her. Any man who would learn to carve wood with a scalpel for her. Any man who would propose in a morgue. Yeah, I concede defeat. He turned to Chloe, his eyes soft. Be happy, Chloe. Then he raised his glass to the crowd. I ship out for a new post in Midwest tomorrow. So this is a toast to the happy couple and a farewell to me. To Julian and Chloe, may you have a long, happy life and a house full of loud, stubborn children. He drained his glass, turned it upside down, gave us a sharp, formal salute, and walked away. His back was straight, his exit clean. The last, tiny obstacle on our road to happiness had just removed itself with grace and honor. The story was finally perfect. 5 years later, I was the youngest ever director of the Forensic Science Center. She was deputy commissioner of the BPD. We had a beautiful, hell-raising son named Ethan. We called him E.T. for extra time because his mom waited so long for his dad. Life was a chaotic, perfect whirlwind. One night, I came home late, exhausted after a particularly gruesome case. The apartment was quiet. Ethan was asleep. I slipped off my shoes and, out of habit, went to the study first. I pushed open the door and stopped. The window was wide open, the white curtains billowing in the night breeze. And sitting on the sill, a familiar silhouette. She was wearing a silk nightgown, her long hair loose around her shoulders, her bare legs swinging in the open air. In her hand was a can of beer. She saw me and raised the can in a toast, her grin pure mischief. Evening, Director Caldwell. Working late. Just doing a routine inspection. I crossed the room, a tired but fond smile on my face, and lifted her off the cold stone. Deputy Commissioner Reed, you're a little old for this, don't you think? We have a perfectly good front door, you know. She wrapped her arms around my neck, her lips brushing my ear as she blew a soft breath against my skin. Her voice was a low, seductive purr. But you've always liked it when I play this game, haven't you? I leaned down and captured her lips, the taste of beer and Chloe filling my senses. Yes, I murmured against her mouth. I do. I really, really do. The moonlight streamed in, bathing us in its soft glow. The years had passed, taking us from bickering kids to partners and finally to husband and wife. On our different paths, we had always walked together. In our long, quiet love, in every night she still broke into my life, felt as hot and new as the very first day.